Okay, so we're at the very bottom of Tesamid Aleph, up of Tesamid Beis. So we said, how come if we're learning out a married woman who is secluded with another man would become prohibited through Kina Ustira? What about Bathsheba and David Hamelach? So the second answer we're given is the second to last line on Tesamid Aleph. Kihada Amr Shmuel bar Nachmani Amr of Yonasan. David get Krisos Kosev Ishto. Whoever went to war in the time of David Hamelach get Krisos Kosev Ishto. They would get a get to his wife. Because Yishai, David's father, said, "And look to your how your brother is, and Arubosehem take my vets Rubosehem take." What does it mean Arubosehem or Arubasam? Tani Rabbi Yosef Dvarm Hamurav and Beino Lebeino, things that intertwine between him and her, meaning marriage. So check about your brother and what is tying up your brother, tying up not in a bad sense, but meaning his marital situation. So Rashi says that the get was given on condition that if that the man would write a get to his wife and give it to her on condition that if he dies in war, it'll be a get retroactively from this day. So the problem is that since we're learning it out from David and Bathsheba, what happened? But at the time that David and Bathsheba were together, Uriah was still alive. David recalled him from the front lines after that, and then sent him back to the front, and he got killed. So it's a big question there. So how is that even if Uriah wrote a get to Bathsheba, he wasn't dead yet at the time. So not a simple thing. The one answer, the way the Ritva explains it, I believe, and this there's an article from Rav Zevin, the author of Festivals in Halacha. This is called the Or Halacha. It's general topics. He has a lot about war. And when we learned, was it 2 Shavuos ago already about Heter Mechira, or was it last Shavuos? I think it was last Shavuos. So he has a few things about Shemitah in the Sefer also. So according to the Ritva, since the purpose of the get was to make sure that the woman wouldn't have to do Yibum or Chalitza, so only people men who were married, who had a brother and who did not have any children, since he didn't have any children, his wife would need to do Yibum, only they would write a get. So it wasn't literally everyone who went to war would write the get, only those people. Tosos and the Ramban say that the condition was if they don't come back from war, because sometimes they might be captured or this or that. So it wasn't that if they die in the war, but if they don't come back. And Rabbeinu Tam's answer and the Rashba hold that they wrote a full get and gave it unconditionally, but there was kind of an understanding that when he would come back from the war, they would get remarried. But it's not a simple idea of what went on. I mean, of how to explain what happened with David and Bathsheba and with this get. Now nowadays we don't give any it is very highly unusual, if even anyone ever does, to give a get with any conditions, because we're worried about the formulation of the condition. It may not be formulated properly, so we give getting unconditionally. And anyone who's seen the process of the husband ordering the sofer and the Adam to write the get and to sign on the get, and he tells the Beis Din that he's giving the get out of his own free will without any conditions, etc. Yeah.
So is because now I've seen when people get married that the rabbis say, do you want to you know, put this in the agreement that you'll get. Does that mean they're actually
Okay,
given a get at that time when they get
no,
married?
I think there was such a proposal. You mean a get with the shliach?
No, I mean before the chuppah, the rabbi and a lot of Orthodox rabbis now are
So there,
asking the woman, because I was an aide, and they're asking, do you want him to if you want him to sign this, that means
so that's
gotta give you a get or
so that's the
something.
prenup. So that's the prenup from the RCA.
Uh-huh.
So Rabbi Willig,
So it's
was
not a
one, and
conditional get.
no, that's not a conditional. So no,
Okay.
so they don't write a get that they write a get to later. But what that's saying is that if the marriage would fall apart,
Yeah.
the husband's accepting a voluntarily accepting upon himself a fine of like $150 a day or whatever
Yeah.
until he writes the get. So that is to
Okay.
give him to because he doesn't want to pay it, he will be giving the get out of his own free will.
Okay.
I mean, Rabbi Blythe,
So it's more of a prenup. Okay.
it's a prenup. Yeah. It's not a get, it's a prenup.
I can tell you one that I was involved with.
Okay.
Aaron LeBone, number 4.
But the thing is, we know he has a history that he gives a get.
Exactly, right.
So there's not a risk in a case like that. We know that he's a willing get giver.
4, 5, 6, 7.
Right. So that's the prenup. So Rabbi Bleich does feel that that's not exactly, and Rabbi Yashiv was reported to have said that that's not exactly that wouldn't be considered giving it out of your own free will. So they're opposed to the to that. A number of years ago, Moshe Kushner, Oliver Shalom, asked. There was a discussion at the CRC about this, and a certain rabbi in town says he doesn't perform the wedding unless they have a prenup. So then Moshe Kushner asked me, "What does Ramosha hold about it?" I say Ramosha has never done a wedding where there is a prenup, and they were shocked, but it was accurate. And my father, if the Chassan Kala want to sign it, he lets him sign it, but he doesn't. He certainly doesn't require it. He doesn't bring it up. Then we had one case where the Chassan Kala
brought it up.
Okay.
And, she was going, no, I don't need it.
Okay. So we had a thing where the Chassan Kala gave me something, and my father said, "What is it?" So I took a look, and it actually was a postnup. It was that they had gotten legally married already in front of the judge because of the health insurance situation, and so it was a postnup, but for the same idea. So Rochelle Lieberman, who was the head of JTS for a long time, so he in order to solve the Guna so-called the Guna crisis, which was also the impetus for that for the prenup. So he wanted to add something into the text of the Kesuva itself and change the Kesuva, but that did not at all catch on. Even I don't think it even among the students of JTS, I don't think they did that either. But again, for something that we use the same text for hundreds of years, we don't want to start changing that around. The idea is a good idea. I mean, what exactly the text is, I don't remember anymore. But that was what his recommendation.
So what is prenup?
A prenup means a prenuptial agreement. It's an agreement you make before you get married. So commonly, if you hear about it in the news, let's say someone, I think this is 20 years ago already, but Paul McCartney was one of the Beatles. So his wife had died of cancer, and then he remarried someone, and and so maybe people were saying maybe he should sign a prenuptial agreement with her, limiting to how much money she would get from him in case of divorce, and he refused to do it. So let's say in popular culture, we would hear about a prenup is that if someone rich is getting married, they would make their spouse sign something limiting how much they would get in case of divorce. But it could be an agreement about anything. So what this is talking about, this is an agreement that if the wedding would fall apart, the husband is committing himself to go in front of appropriate beis din to give his wife a get. Okay, Amar Abaye. So now we're going back. So we're ending this this tangent. So we had this what we had started on the top of Testament Aleph was what if if the husband says Pesach pasuach matzasi. So there was no blood from her at her wedding, and she was supposedly a basula, a virgin, so there should have been blood. But in this case, so Rashi said either it's from the family, which you're going to see later today, that certain families, the wives did not have dam basulim, they didn't have blood in this cases, so you couldn't make it. And according to Tosfos, it seems that anyone can make this claim, but the claim is not as strong as if there'd be no blood after the consummation of the marriage. So Rabbi Lazar said, so Amar Abai says, Afana Nami Tanina, we learned a brisa similar to what Rabbi Lazar taught. Besula Nises. Okay, so again, what did he say? I didn't finish reading it. He said, he's believed to make her forbidden on him. So in regard to him, he thinks that she committed that she was committed adultery from the time that he got engaged to her and gave her the ring, which it's not what we call engagement. But what we call engagement, there's no halachic connection yet. But in those days, you give the ring. Say Rabbi Kodeshesli, they had a certain level that we were connected already called Erison, but they didn't have the Nesuin yet. So it doesn't say that she. So because that we're going to see here, so different because of that wording that he's believed to make her forbidden on him. It doesn't say that we believe him that she committed adultery. So there's we'll see what the halachic significances can be. So we learned in the Brisa, Basula Nises Liyom Arvi. Virgin gets married on Wednesday. Liyom Arvi in Liyom Chamishi lo. On the Thursday, yeah. On Wednesday, yes. On Thursday, no. My time, why not? Mishumi Krui Daita. Because if he would find that she wasn't a basula, or he didn't think she was a basula, we don't want him to cool off before he'd be able to go to Beis Din. And because Beis Din sits Thursday morning, we want him to get married on Wednesday. So if something's wrong, he'll go to Beis Din right away and not cover up something, because if really she wasn't and she had committed adultery, they wouldn't be allowed to stay married. So we don't want him to cool off. Ulamai. So why is this important for him not to cool off? Ila mesa leksuva nesavla. If it's in regard to giving her the ksuva money, which we're going to talk about today, nesavla. So if he wants the marriage to end, so let him pay the ksuva and be it. So Ella Osralam. No, so the reason he needs to go to the Beis Din is because he feels that she committed adultery to him. She was unfaithful to him, so they wouldn't be allowed to stay married. And because of that, you need to go to the Beis Din. And this is when he made a certain complaint. So what's the complaint that the Beis Din would, meaning, because you can claim anything you want. The question is do you have any, is it a likely complaint? Is it a complaint that we would believe you or not? So my love, the tainas pesach pasuach. So why don't we say that the brisa there that says, or actually our Mishna, Besula Nisis Yom Arvi, the very first Mishna of, isn't it that he goes to Beis Din and says the door, so to speak, was open. There was no tissue of the hymen, and the Beis Din would believe him based on that claim. So Abai tried to prove from our Mishnah that the claim of Pesach Pasuach is a reliable claim. So the Gemara says, "Lo, the Katoin Tan is damin." No, the case is where he's saying there was no blood. Blood, there's that. So you have a white sheet and you have also a cloth or whatever. So that you could say there either is blood on there or there isn't blood there. So that's something that's verifiable. But for him to say Pesach Pasuach, I didn't feel any pressure or any whatever, and so I don't think that there was any tissue of the hymen there. That's something that's not verifiable. So that is not a claim that the Beis Din would listen to. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Omer Pesach pasuach matzasi neman lafsida ksuva. If he says, if the doorway was open, neman lafsida ksuva, he's believed to make her lose her ksuva. So we're going to say soon what exactly the ksuva is, but we give one amount to a basula, to a virgin, and a lesser amount to a woman who was previously married. And so if it ends up that she's not a virgin, she's going to get the lower amount, not the amount for a basula. Amr of Yosef, my Kamashmuel. Rav Yosef says, what's the innovative thing? What's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel's statement? Tanina, we already learned. Ha'ochel eitzel chama b'Yehuda shaloba edem eno yochel liton tanis besula. Mipnei shem misachet imo. Mipnei shem misachet imo. If someone would eat in by his father-in-law, meaning a man is engaged to someone who lived in the region of Eretz Yisrael called Yehuda, because his fiancée, the girl, lived in Yehuda. So if he visited her at her family's house, he is no longer able to claim that she wasn't a basula after the marriage. Because in Yehuda they would have the chassan and the kala, even though before the wedding, they would have them in a room together, secluded. So whatever Rishonim talk about that it was done lishma and for good, with good intentions, but whatever it is, but because they were secluded in a room together, that chassan no longer has any ability to claim that she wasn't a basula. So he wants to make a diuk from the words of this brisa. Yehuda hu delo matzi tain. In Yehuda, the geographic area of the Eretz Yisrael called Yehuda, you can't make such a claim. But Habi Galil matzi tain. But if you're in the Galil further north, you would be able to make such a claim. Ulamai. So what benefit is he going to make from making such a complaint? Ila osra love. If he's saying that she should no longer be allowed to marry him because she was unfaithful, but Yehuda amai lo. Why couldn't he make such a claim in Yehuda? Elalav of Sida Ksuva. So it must be that the claim that he's able to make is to say, I know I gave her a Ksuva for $5,000, but it should only be $2,500 because she wasn't a basula. And what's the claim that he is giving to base it on? My lab to taina specific pasuach. And why don't we say that the claim that by which he's saying that she wasn't a basula is because he felt that so to speak, the door was open. So the Gemara says no, lo the tainas damim. Again, it was a case where he was claiming there was no blood. So the blood, again, because it's verifiable, it's a stronger claim than Pesach pasuach. So now we turn the page to Yedam Aleph. Itmar, it was taught. Amar Nachman Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Lazar Chachamim Tiknu Lahem Libnos Yisrael Lebsula Masayim Ulamana Maneh. The Chachamim decreed for the Jewish young women that a virgin gets 200 zuz and a widow gets 100 zuz. Behem Heminuhu, and the Chachamim believed him. Shem Amar Pesach Pasuach Matzasi Naman. That if he says that the doorway was open, he is believed, and therefore she would only get a ksuba of the 100 zuz and not of the 200 zuz, because he's believed to say that she wasn't a virgin. So basically, just like different people in different communities have different customs. So whatever reason was in Yehuda, the custom was what they would put the chassan and kala together to make them feel, strongly attracted to each other and make them look forward to the wedding day. Something like that. So just like, people in different countries have different minhagim, whether it doesn't have to be Jewish minhagim, different people in different countries do different things. So that was the thing they did in that region for whatever reason.
How much is a Zeus? Do you know? And again, I'm
so in Israel they put in Israel they put actual amounts of shekels or dollars or Argentinian pesos and stuff or whatever. Yeah, Especially, yeah. So in Israel, they do that. In America, we don't do that.
Why not?
We still write money.
Maybe it was an Irish actual amounts.
Right. Yes, they do put actual amounts. So I believe you 100% that you've seen
Why
actual
don't
amounts.
they?
Okay, so one reason is like I said a few minutes ago, something that we've had used the same text for hundreds of years. Some people don't want to make any changes. That would be one reason. Reason number two is because we're really not sure how much this amount is. It's a big machlokas. So Reb Chaim Zimmerman, who was a Talmud of Rav Aaron's father, and he was Rosh of Skokie before Rav Aaron, he felt that this was a very, very large amount. So if you'd put in real amounts, you might need to put in real amounts. I mean, you'd be binding yourself, but maybe that's not such a good idea for a couple of reasons. One reason is, let's say you were in Israel anywhere from a couple hundred years ago until 1980, until 1978 or whatever. So what was the currency at that time? Well, the currency happened to have changed a bunch of times.
The old shekel.
First there was whatever it was under the Ottomans, then it was the original shekel, and then it was a lira, and now it's a new shekel. So let's say that you would put, I'll give you 10,000 lira. How much is that worth nowadays? It's worthless. So currency in the old days, and I'm interested to know about this. I don't know that much about it, but currency, for the most part, it seems it was minted by a king, and that's why Bar Kochba, for a few years that he had control of certain areas in Israel, he minted his own coins and had money. But after Bar Kochba, his revolt was beaten back, the currency was worthless. Rav Dessler speaks about here. Where's one of his quotes? Yeah, translation of it. Strive for truth. Here's one of the later translated ones. Rav Dessler, if I'm not mistaken, so his father had been a big businessman, and he had a suitcase full of money from the time of the Tsar. And then after the Bolshevik Revolution, what happened to that big suitcase of money? It was completely worthless. You can use it, as scratch paper. So a more recent thing is that the currencies sometimes become worthless. So if you would promise her currency and it ends up that currency is worthless, the whole the idea of the Kesuvos is worthless, because the whole idea of the Kesuvos is to protect her in case, so she wouldn't get divorced or whatever, and then she wouldn't have protection. So from that perspective, a zuz might be better than putting in a currency. And then thirdly, we know that currencies fluctuate in modern foreign exchange market, which it seems to be a pretty modern phenomenon. And in those days, money was, there didn't seem to be too much inflation over time. In Gemara's and Baba Kama talking about values of fields, it talked about a seasonal variation, because is it before the harvest, or is it, people usually didn't sell their field while it was already had grain growing in it already. So there was a small seasonal fluctuation, but it was cyclical and it was predictable. So perhaps another reason is much more minor compared to the previous reason I just gave, because sometimes these currencies end up becoming worthless, is just because we don't know exactly what it's going to be worth. Now it's true we don't know what the zuz is worth either. So I mean, in the Mishna, I think the Mishna in Peah, I think says, if someone doesn't have 200 zuz, they're considered poor, because 200 zuz was the amount that they could buy a certain size field. But nowadays, I mean, we don't really have an agricultural economy, so that, meaning most people don't have a farm. So that definition probably wouldn't apply. So it's expensive to buy farmland, so it's expensive to buy a house also. So Okay, so the Mishnah Peah, Perkas Mishnah Ches, Mishay Shlomasayim Zuzal Yito Laket Shecho Peah Meiser Ani. Someone who has 200 zuz is not able to take the corner of the field or take a forgotten sheaf, or excuse me, Laket is not the Peah is the corner. Laket is Laket. It's one of the here. So I'm reading here from the Art Scroll English commentary. The rabbis calculated that 200 zuz was sufficient to cover the cost of food and clothing for the period of a year. There is therefore no need for a person who had 200 zuz of disposable assets to take in that year like a shechach or peah. So if you'd have 200 zuz, it gave you a certain level of economic stability. But I've never seen in the United States that people would put an amount in there. But I hear in Israel it's very common, and especially when if the husband is from not in Israel, they try to put a big price to they think he's rich or whatever to whatever. And I heard that Moroccans, there's some number, I forgot what the number is, but there's some number that's a lucky number. They like putting that number in because they think it's lucky. I don't remember what it is, but I've read about that. So if the chachamim to protect the woman said that he has to give her ksuva, but then if at the same time they say that the husband is believed to say Pesach pasuach, that he's able to cut the ksuva in half, then they're not really making such a strong benefit for the woman. So why would they do it to her benefit if they would let him, kind of not exactly at a whim, but without that much level of proof that he's able to then cut the ksuva in half. So Amar Rava said, Chazaka inadam terech b'sudo mafsida, because there's a chazaka, a very strong presumption that someone isn't going to spend for that all the money and time and effort involved for making a nice big wedding party if it's going to be for nothing. So whether it's because
in those days the man used to pay.
Yes, and that's what he said. Berchas chasanim beveis chasanim. And the father of the
That's good.
and the father of the groom, because they would get the food already and pay for the food, right? So why that changed, I don't know. Good question. So whether it's because he wouldn't spend money unless he really thought he wouldn't have made such a big wedding, he would have still made a nice wedding if she wasn't a basula, but he made such a big blowout wedding because he thought she was a basula. So because he's spending that money, he has some credibility to say Pesach pasuach matzasi, or possibly you could say that he might lose face from having made a big wedding and inviting people, so many people. It doesn't look as good now if that would have happened. So he wouldn't make the claim in front of the basin of Pesach pasuach matzasi if he didn't really believe it. So it's not something that he would make just out of caprice. I mean, obviously, he can make, 4% of the time that might happen, but most of the time that happened because he really, really thought it was a true claim. Because it's balanced out by the fact that he made this big party. Tana, we learned because the ksuva is, so this is says the word knas, which is a fine. The chachamim made a fine. The woman would only collect from the lowest level of field. So we know that there's 3 levels of property. We call idius the best, baininus the medium quality field, and the ziburis. So what does it mean? So let's say if you use you have the same acre of land. Let's say the idius might give you 100 bushels, and the baininus might give you 90 bushels, and the ziburis would only give you 80 bushels. You plant the same amount, it's just not as good land. So because this is rabbinic, she would collect from the lowest quality land of her husband or ex-husband's estate. Whereas, let's say the halacha for Nezikin, if someone damaged someone else's property or their ox, damaged the other person's property, for Nezikin, we pay from the highest level quality field. That's what we learned in Parshas Mishpatim. So the Gemara says, "Knasa, my knasa." Why does it say that it's a fine, that the Chachamim made a fine? So the Gemara says, okay, we had a mistake in the text of the Brisa. Because it was a takanas chachamim, it was a decree from the chachamim. She collects from the lowest level. Now you could say, and I say this partially in jest, is that we know that the Sephardic pronunciation wouldn't say the word takanas chachamim. They would say takanat chachamim. But the word knas definitely has a samach sound, even according to people who have what we call the Sephardic pronunciation. Now, how would you make a mistake if you were saying over a Mishnah verbally, how to mix up the word takanas and knas is only if you had what we call Ashkenazic pronunciation. You say the word suf, the letter suf, not taf. Takanas and knas. I'm just pointing that out. Okay, so then this brisa continued. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Kesuvos Isha Min Torah. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says the ksuva is on the Torah level. Now we mentioned earlier, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago already, that the Rambam counts in Sefer Mitzvos that there's a mitzvah to marry woman be'isha bechuppah uksuva. So there is an idea. So the basic explanation is there is responsibilities and obligations that you have on the Torah level. And in Parshas Mishpatim, we have the pasuk Mohar Habasulos. So Mohar Habasula by the Shifcha, a Jewish girl who was sold by her father to be a servant in someone else's house. So there's a halach of yud that the person who had bought her, so she goes free either after 6 years or once she shows signs of maturity. Why am I missing something? I think I'm missing but there's a thing called yud. The owner or his son can decide to marry her. So even though Yovel, if Yovel falls out, so Yovel will free her also if she would pay off the amount. Let's say if she was sold for $600 in 6 years and she worked for 2 years, so for $400 the master gets paid off, so then she would go free. Also, if when she shows sign of physical maturity, she also goes free. But there's this thing called yud. So when the Torah is talking about there, she'eraksu sava ona solo yigra, bim shel she'elo lo yasala v'yatzachina mein kasef. So there are some obligations that the Torah gives from the husband to the wife, but it wasn't so clear. But the idea of a ksuva, Rav Shimon Gamliel says that our ksuva even has a basis in that, whereas according to most opinions, and it seems the way that most Rishonim paskin, is that the ksuva itself is derabana. They would have to agree that he has a general obligation to feed her or clothe her, but I guess in case of divorce that she would get severance package, so to speak, lahavdil. That's rabbinic according to most opinions. So then the Gemara asks, "Umi Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Hachi." Does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel hold that the ksuva is from a Torah level? Because we have a brisa that seems to say that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that it's only rabbinic. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, Kesef Yishkol Kmar Habasulos. So this brisa is in. It's later on here. Sheyehei Zek Kmar Habasulos, Umar Habasulos Kazeh. So this is talking about where if someone seduced an unmarried young woman, and so he seduced her, so she's no longer a virgin, obviously. So he has to pay the father the difference in her value because she's no longer basula. Shehezek more basulos. So the fine that he has to pay is like what a basula gets. More basulos kazet. And the drasha is, so the more basulos is the same amount as this fine, which is 50 silver coins. So from here, the Chachamim made a smach. They relied. They said we can rely that the ksuva is 50 based on this Torah halacha. Not that it is actually Torah halacha, but they compared it to something. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that the ksuva of a woman is not from the Torah at all. It's only rabbinic. So this brisa clearly says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that the ksuva is not midiraisa. So the Gemara answers a poch. So sometimes, because the Mishnayos and brises were all transmitted orally, sometimes you made an error. You've switched the two opinions. So that's what we say here. Flip the opinion. Say that the first opinion is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion, that it's compared to the Mora Basulos, and the Chachamim say that the ksuva is only rabbinic. So maybe, how come we're so sure that we want to say that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that ksuva is diaraisa? Maybe Rabbi. So we know. So we're willing to concede that there clearly was a mistake in the transmission and the brisa is wrong. But maybe the first brisa we quoted is wrong. The one that we just said is the accurate one. The Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds is d'Rabbanan. And maybe it's the first brisa where we had Rabbi Shimon Gamliel saying that it was diaraisa. Maybe that one was flipped, and really he held it's d'Rabbanan. So Hashamina le Rabbi Shimon Gamliel the Amar Ksuva Sishim b'Diraisa. We know from another place Rabbi Shimon Gamliel clearly holds that the Ksuva is from a Torah level. It's not, because we learned in the Mishna, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer. If Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, so what happens if you got married in one country? So maybe this might relate to what you asked. If you married someone in one country, in Kaputkia, and then they moved to Eretz Yisrael and they got divorced. No la mimos Kaputkia. So he would pay her ksuva from the Kaputkia money.
I never heard Kaputkia. That money's probably really worth this.
So Rashi says it's in the last parak here of Kesuvos. If you married her in Eretz Yisrael and you divorced her in Kaputkia, you pay her from Eretz Yisrael money. That's where you were when you wrote the Kesuva, which are worth less than Kaputkia money. If you married her in Kaputkia and divorced her in Eretz Yisrael, you give her from the Eretz Yisrael coins because of what it was written in the Kesuvos. The Kesuvos says you give her 300 coins, which our Kesuvos don't say that. But if the Kesuvos said 300 coins, you give her 300 Eretz Yisrael coins because that's the lesser amount of the versus the Kaputkia money. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer no sen la mimos Kaputkia shenishtabed behen kishar malva t'ksaver ksuva d'iraisa. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no. If you got married in Kaputkia, you have to pay her Kaputkia money, even though now you're in Eretz Yisrael, because you obligated yourself in those money, because he holds it's d'iraisa. So whether it's suffix d'iraisa l'chumer, which it probably isn't, but he holds that you had indebted yourself with those money, so you have to pay with that money. So we know from that brayso that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel definitely holds that the ksuva is midiraisa. Or you could say that the whole second brisa follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion, but we have a phrase missing from the middle of that brisa, and this is what it should say. This is how the Chachamim decided on the amount of Kesuvos 50, because we learned it out from this Mefata, the seduced girl. Kesuvos almana eina midivrei Torah ela midivrei sofrim. but the ksuva for a divorced woman or a widowed woman, I should say, is only for rabbinic. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said Kesuvos almana ain't midivrei Torah, ela midivrei sofrim. That the Kesuvos almana is not from a Torah level, rather it's from a rabbinic level. So we could hold that whole second brisa followed Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, but we're talking about two cases. The initial thing is that it's the Diraisa, but then we had a phrase missing, is that there's a difference between a widow and a virgin. That the virgin's ksuva is from the Torah, but a widow's ksuva is only rabbinic. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel did say ksuva is rabbinic, but that was the ksuva of a divorced woman or a widow, a previously married woman. But for a basula, first time married woman, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds it's definitely diraisa. Okay, how the asal kamed Rav Nachman Amar le pasuach matzasi. There was a certain man who came in front of Rav Nachman and said, I got married and I felt that there was no pressure. As Pesach pasuach matzasi, she wasn't a virgin. So Amar le Rav Nachman asvu kufri mi berchasa mi berchavasa. So hit him with these hard asbu kufri, hit him with palm branches, which probably are, Rashi seems to say they were hard and they had little things poking out of there to make it even more painful. And mi berchasa chavitale, he must have known from berchasa. Berchasa was the name of a well-known woman of ill repute in that place, or was the name of the madam, whatever. So he must, because this is his first marriage. How else would he know what he should be feeling when he's consummating the marriage, unless he had already had a custom to go by the Beis Zonos over there, by the women of ill repute. The Rav Nachman Huda Amar Meheman. But Rav Nachman is the one who said we would believe a chassan if he said Pesach Matzasi. So why are you giving him malchus for lashes? It's not rabbinic. It's not biblical lashes, but it's rabbinic lashes. How can we give him lashes if we would believe him? So we answer Meheman who must be only kufri. We believe him, but for the fact that he is getting married for the first time and he is making this claim, he must have spent some time with the women of ill repute, so he has to get hit. Rav Achai Mishane, but Rav Achai answered, Kan b'bachar. The difference is it a young man with his first marriage, and Kan b'nasri. This is someone who had previously married. When do we believe him? Only if he's been married before. And if he's married before, he knows what it feels like, so he doesn't get lashes. But for a young man, how else would he know unless he spent time there at the Beis Zonos? So he has to get hit as a punishment. A certain man came in front of Rabbi Gamliel. Amarle Pesach pasuach matzasi. He said, she wasn't a basula. If the door was open, Amarle Shema hitisa. Maybe you didn't have a direct bia. Maybe you angled it on the side, so maybe it wasn't open, but you felt it was. Emshul chamashal. I'll give you an analogy. Lama davar. What is it like? Someone who was walking in complete darkness. Hitam it's a pasuach. If he didn't go through the doorway, if he went through the doorway on the angle, the door seemed to be open. Lo hitam it's no. But if he went straight, if he didn't go on a angled path, it was locked. Meaning the way that sometimes the door isn't completely closed, but if you come in from an angle, you think it's open. Like if the door is open a little bit, but you come in through that angle, you go in without bumping into anything. But if you would go in straight the way you normally go through the door, you're going to bump into something. But because it's like someone, if you can't see, so you don't know if you're going straight or you're going crooked, sometimes you think you're going straight, but really you're crooked. So maybe you think that you did that Pesach pasuach matzasi, but maybe you were the one who went crooked. Lahavdil, there is a tremendous mashal that I heard from Rabbi Eisenberg. That's Jerry Eisenberg's older brother. Said at Rav Aron's house. I was still at Ari Kran at the time, but the mashal was. I won't say that the context isn't that important, but he says if you're on, this is a great Chicago mashal. if you're on Lincoln, so if you're on most streets in Chicago, you know if you're going north or south or east or west. You're going straight. If you're on Lincoln Avenue, what do the side streets look like? When you're on Lincoln, because you're going crooked, the other streets that really are straight, they look crooked to you. So that's another word for the example of this mashal. Right. If you're on Grosse Point, the straight streets look crooked, but really you're on the crooked path. So so that's what he's saying to him. Maybe your wife is fine, but you're the one who did something wrong. Not something wrong, but you did it, and you didn't do what you thought you did because it's a mashal, as if you're a man in a dark room. You don't know if you're heading straight through the doorway or crooked through the doorway. And some say Rabbi Gamliel said the following to him: Shama b'mezid hitisa v'akarta l'desha v'abra. Maybe you intentionally went in on an angle, and then you. So article translates, you tore out the door and the bar. So according to this, meaning you didn't just knock down the door, you knocked down the whole door frame. You were like the Marines or the SWAT teams, not the Marines, but the SWAT teams, and you used the whole thing to break open the door. You didn't just break open the door, you broke open the whole door frame, so you didn't even feel the pressure because you didn't go through the door, you knocked off the whole door frame. Now, I thought I'll give you a parable. What's it like? Someone who's going in darkness. If he went on the crooked, the door was open. But if he did intentionally go on the angle, the door was locked. Okay, so now we're switching gears a little bit. Someone came to Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rabbi. Amar Le, he said to him, Rabbi ba'ati v'lamatzasi dam. He said, I got married, but there was no blood. Amar Lo, so the Kala said to Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Basulayi. See, Rabbi, I promised that I was a virgin. Amar Lahem aviuli oso sudar. So he said, bring me the sheet that they had from that night. Heviulo asudar. They brought it to him. Ushra b'mayim v'chip. So he soaked it in water and he laundered it. Umatzalav kama tipe damin. And they found some drops of blood on it. Amar Le, so he said, go and have a zechus in your acquisition, meaning everything was fine, don't worry about it. So what Rashi, I think, is it Rashi? Yeah, so Rashi says that the semen happened to cover over the blood on the sheet, so they didn't see it. So he laundered it in a way that it would get off the shechva zera, but it wouldn't launder the blood. And we found that there was blood; it had just been covered over. Amar lehuna marbrei de Rava miparzaki el Rabashi. Huna, the son. Hunamar, the son of Rava from Parzakia, said to Ravashi, Ananami nebed. Why don't we do this when they ask us such a shaila? So Amar Le, Ravashi answered, now we go to Yodam and Beis, Giyot Shalanu Kikibu Shalahan. Our good washing is like their regular washing. So meaning this halacha comes up in regard to the 9 days, is that the waters in Eretz Yisrael were much cleaner than the waters in Bavel. So in Eretz Yisrael, they could do a much better washing than they could in Bavel. So basically, Rav Ashi was saying, our waters, we can't do the type of washing that he did. So that's why we can't do this. If we would try to do it, we wouldn't be able to do what Rabbi Gamliel did. And if you want to say, and we should do the higher level cleaning, ma'abrele chumarta. But when we use a stone to clean, because nowadays we do the washing machine. Before the washing machine, they had those boards that you would rub it against. In the time of the Gemara, they would use stones to rub stuff. So if we would use a stone, then that would rub off the blood also, and then the whole thing would be geferlach. We wouldn't be able to show that she had been a basula. So we're not able to do any tricks like this to take a look at the sheets to be able to find blood that may have been covered over with something else. How does it come to Rabbi Gamliel bar Rabbi? Another person came in front of Rabbi Gamliel bar Rabbi. Amar late, because obviously Rabbi Gamliel bar Rabbi, that family, the family Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, or of the Nasi, they lived in Eretz Yisrael, so they were clearly in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Ashi was clearly in Bava. Amar le, so he said to her, Rabbi Ba'ati Vlamatzasi Dam. He said, I consummated my marriage and there was no blood. Amar le, Adayin Basulani. And she said, I'm still a Basula. So she's saying he did not consummate the marriage yet. He thought he did, but he didn't. So that's why there's no blood. I am a Basula, and if he would do things the right way, he will see blood. Amar Lahan, so Rabbi Gamliel bar Rabbi said to them, whoever people around him, bring me two women slaves, one who is a virgin and one who is not. And he had them sit on top of a barrel of wine. For the slave who was not a virgin, the smell from the wine went up through her body because she was sitting on it, and they were able to hear, to smell it from coming, I guess, out of her breath. Basula ain't rechanodef, but the basula, because it showed that I mean, again, scientifically, this doesn't sound like it's such a that shouldn't work. But the basula ain't rechanodef. They couldn't smell the smell of the wine coming up through her body and out of her mouth. So so they put this young woman, this bride, on the barrel, and they couldn't smell the wine. So so he said, go make acquire your Mecca. So even though this is the same phrase as before, I would say that this had a slightly different meaning, and say, there's nothing wrong, and consummate the marriage properly this time. So so according to this, why didn't he just test her? Why did he take the ask for slaves first? So Gemara Havashamina lay. So he had a tradition that you could do this, but he never actually saw it being done. So he had to kind of do a quick experiment to see if it was reliable to use in this emergency situation. So he needed to experiment. So he experimented with the slaves. And he thought maybe that whether he wasn't an expert or it wasn't a reliable enough method, and it wasn't the proper thing to embarrass or to treat lowly Benos Yisrael if it wouldn't have worked. So therefore he did it with the slaves first to show that it would work. And then once he saw it would work, he did that with this woman. We'll just do a few more lines. I have to go. Someone came in front of the elder Rabbi Gamliel and Amar Lo, Rabbi Ba'utli V'lo Matzasi Dam. I consummated my marriage, but I didn't. My wife, there was no blood. Amar Lo, she said, Rabbi Mimishvachas Dorkati Yani. I am from the family of Dorkati. She'ein lahem lo dam nidav lo dam besulim. They don't have menstrual blood, and we don't have virginal blood. So he investigated and found that what she said was true. She was from that family, and that family did have that condition, genetic trait, whatever. So he told the husband, everything's fine. You're praiseworthy that you married into this family. So the Gemara says, "My Dorkati." Why is the family called Dorkati? What does it mean? Dorkatua, a generation that gets cut off. So Amar Rabbi Chanina said, what Rabbi Gamliel said, that you're praiseworthy to marrying to that family. It wasn't it was not a good thing. The Tani Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia taught kishimshas or yafla isa, just like sourdough is good for bread. Those days didn't have yeast. But if you put sourdough in, it would make the bread rise faster. It's good. The blood is good for a woman. V'tana mishum Rabbi Meir. We learned in the name of Rabbi Meir, Kol isha shedamem merubin b'nei merubin. If a woman has a lot of blood, she has a lot of blood. She'll have a lot of children. So it seems that he's probably not going to have a lot of children from this woman, from this family. So why did he say Ashracha, you're praiseworthy? So Itmar, some said Rabbi Yerbia Bar Amar Zechei b'mekachacha. Amar le. Amar le. So, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Amar Nischayv Mechacha Amar le. So one says it's a good thing, and one says Nischayv Mechacha. This is you know this is who you're married, but it's not exactly the best thing for you. You got a bad deal. Amar le Bishlam Amad Amar Nischayv Hanu Karbechanina. We understand if he said you got a bad deal because that would follow the opinion that she's probably not going to have too many children. But if he says, that enjoy your wife, what's the enjoyment if she's not going to be able to have too many kids or a kid at all? So we answered the lo suffik nida. Since she doesn't have blood, she's not going to have blood that you're not going to be sure maybe she's a suffik nida. So because he doesn't have to worry about her being a nida or even a suffik nida, so that's something which is a positive thing. So he was praising him for that. Hahu da'asa Kamei de Rabbi. So a man came to Rabbi Huda Nasi, Amrle Rabbi Balti Dam. I consummated my marriage, there was no blood. Amrlo, Rabbi Adain Basula Yisi, Ushne Beturs Hava. I was a Basula, but it's a famine. And so where I've been malnourished. Ra Rabbi Shapnam Shcharim. So he saw that their faces were black out of hunger. So he said, take them into the bathhouse, so should have a bath and relax, and to probably rub some oil into her skin. Also, he gave them food and drink, and then he gave them a room. And then the husband again did the act of consummation again, not exactly consummation, and there was blood. So Rabbi says, enjoy your acquisition. Karile Rabbi Alam, Tafad Oram al Atzmam Yavesh Hayaka. Rabbi recited the pasuk about them. Their skin was stuck to their bones. It was dry as wood. So because she had no nutrition, she didn't have any extra blood to come out, but really she was a basula. So now we have reached the end of this Mishnah. And here to show will continue next week. Sorry, I have to rush a little bit here at the end.